Welcome back to the studio, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. One question I've been getting a lot lately is how I set up the console to do an analog mix, or how I set up the computer to work with the analog gear. And since I've been mixing the last few days, I thought this would be a great opportunity for me to show you one of the ways that I use the analog gear to mix. Now, this mix is mostly analog, meaning everything is coming out on the console. For the most part, I'm doing all my levels and everything here. I do have a couple stereo groups where I'm making some decisions in the box before they come out, but I'll go over that in a minute. The first thing is I have to set up, in this case I'm using Logic, so I have to set up my outputs in Logic to show up here on the console. And let me start with the drums. I'll just show you what I mean. So as you can see, I have 3 tracks of drums, or 3 kick mics. I have an in, an out, and then I have a sub kick. I have a top and bottom snare, 2 toms, rack and floor, a pair of overheads, my hats, my over the kick mic, and I actually set up 2 sets of rooms, but on this I ended up only using my wide rooms because I liked them better for this track, and I'm not using a whole lot of room actually. So first off, I made a few decisions in here. I wanted to keep this inside of 24 tracks. I didn't want to have more than that for this particular mix. I do have 40 outputs available to me with my I/O, which is what I guess I should tell you that first. My I/O is a Motu 24 I/O and then 2 2408 MK3s. So I have 40 ins and outs available to me. In this case, I'm only using maybe about 26, 28, 29, just shy of 30 outputs actually. But I am making some decisions here in the box. So my kick drums, here as you can see, I've got them all going output 1 right there, which shows up right here on the console. And I've made my level decisions here. So I have my kick in, it's 0. I have the kick out just down about 2 dB, and I took the sub kick down about 5.5. There's no EQ. I have no processing going on up here whatsoever. All of that is happening. I have some EQ out here on the console, as well as a Meek compressor doing a little bit of compression on the kick drum. The snares I have grouped, both the top and bottom snare I've grouped together, and they're going out output 2. As you can see, I messed with a few things, some EQ here as well, and didn't use it in the box. Decided to go for the console on the EQ because I like the sound of it better. The Trident EQ is fantastic. Rack toms going out 3 and 4. I am using the Logic expander. I love this thing. I didn't want to do mute automation. I didn't want to cut them out completely. I just wanted to actually keep a little bit of the cymbals out this time. And this expander is fantastic for doing that. The SSL, the Waves SSL channel strip has a great expander in it as well. The overheads going out output 5 and 6. The hi-hat going out 7. My over the kick going out 8. And my rooms I actually grouped to go out 9 and 10. Now, you'll notice that those are going out a stereo group, but over here on, say, my overheads, I chose to go out 5 and 6. There's a reason for that. Usually, I may have a mono or a couple different mono room mics set up as well, and I set all of my room mics to go out the same 2 channels on the console. And then I make all my decisions here in the box of what's going to be on at a given time. So that's why I send them out a stereo output as opposed to, 9 and then 10, left and right. So that way I can have my mono, I can have my stereo tracks all going out the stereo group. And then here on the console, I just pan it out nice and wide. But the overheads, I choose the same thing with the toms, because I could easily take these out of stereo pair. However, I like the panning on the console better than the panning in the box. So the kick, let's just hear a little bit of this. Let me set up a loop. So there's our kick. That's all 3 kick mics together. There's snare top and bottom, which is up. Where we go? Which is getting a little bit of EQ from the console and is also going through a Meek Me-C. Overheads. Not getting any compression. I'm not doing anything compression-wise to the overheads. I am doing some EQ on the board. Let's just hear those together with the hats. Now the over the kick mic. Let me see if I'm really the only processing going on the drums is the expander and just a touch of channel EQ on the floor tom, where I'm notch filtering actually. I had a little bit of a little too much right there at 80, and I'm just pulling that out just a little bit. But then on the board, once I've made my decision on how I'm going to group these, so all 3 kick mics coming out channel 1 on the console. Both snare mics coming out channel 2 on the console. The toms are coming out 3 and 4, overheads 5, 6, hat on 7, over the kick on 8, and my rooms are all coming out 9 and 10. So I'm using, as you can see by the blue lights up here, a lot of the console EQ because I think it sounds great. I'm also using some compression. Like I said, the kick and the snare going through the Meek Me-C, and I have the toms, which are here on 3 and 4, going through a DBX 166, just getting a couple dB. Then I'm taking, I don't know if you can see this all the way up here, but I have my sub-assignments up here, and all the drums are going to channel 1 and 2 on my subgroup, as well as my bass, but we'll get to that in a second. I'll pull that out. So the drums all come up here. So that is everything except the over the kick mic. And I just didn't like, especially on the second half of the tune, how the over the kick mic sounded when it was in the drum and bass bus, because that is going through an Overstayer VCA compressor, not getting hit. I'm not squashing it or anything. It's actually set really fast with a kind of medium release just to tame transients, really. I'm not trying to, add a whole bunch more. And the rooms are also not going through the group. So just the drums minus the rooms and the over the kick mic. I'll add the over the kick mic in. Now, the last thing I'm doing to the drums processing-wise is I have a good old Elisa's quad reverb has a couple settings that I really dig for drums. And I'm using the auxes on the console to send just the kick, the snare, and just a little bit of the toms over to my Elisa's quad reverb, and that comes back up here on my effects returns. So let's hear, I got that soloed up. No quad reverb. So that's adding quite a bit of, you can hear the space around the kick drum, and you can also hear it thickens up the snare a little bit. In the track, it helps a lot. So just to recap the drum part of the setup. In the box, I'm grouping my kick drums all to come out output 1 to show up on channel 1 of the console. I'm grouping my snares to come out output 2 to channel to on the console. Toms go to 3 and 4, overheads go to 5 and 6, and on all those I'm using the console panning. Hats on 7, over the kick on 8, and my rooms are coming out stereo 9 and 10. Everything but the over the kick and the rooms go to the drum and bass bus, which I have the bass going with the drum bus on this. I'll get to that in just a second though. So let's add, I'm going to add the rooms in. Okay, now one thing on these rooms, let me pull up the automation. You can see all this stuff right here. That's all my crazy room automation. And what I'm doing, since I've already compressed these rooms when we were tracking, I didn't compress them anymore because I was okay with how they sounded. So what I've done is I've basically have it all at -10, and it's going up to 0 just for the snare hits. And you can see, here I'll play it and you can see what's happening here. Off. On. Off. On. So it's adding a nice sense of space around the snare and a little bit of depth that we didn't have from the dry drums or even from the drum reverb. But that's how I've set this part of the drum mix up. Now, I decided to send my bass to the drum bus as well, because sometimes I just like how when you stick the drums and the bass together under the same compressor, I like how things kind of come together. So here, and I've done two things with the bass. Here is the drums and just the DI'd bass. Now the bass, getting a good amount of some console EQ. I also have a DBX 160X compressor on it in over easy mode, squashing it pretty well. I love how the over easy on the DBX just kind of makes the peaks come down and the bottoms come up, and it really evens things out. Now it takes some of the dynamic away, and I lost some of how some of the notes popped. So what I did over here, let me go to my bass section. You can see my bass track is right here, and I'm sending to bus 14, which is right next to it. And I was watching something with Michael Brower recently that he was using this. I'm like, man, I've never used that. I'm going to try that plug-in. And I'm using this to create distortion. And then I'm hitting it with an H comp, which I love this compressor. It's kind of got a nice attitude. Pretty fast tack, really fast release. This I'm trying to make it kind of pump, and that's coming up over here on this is subgroup 5. So it's going out of output 27, out of my I/O. I'm using the patch bay to patch it into the monitor return here on the subgroup. Just the distortion. Clean bass. Distortion and together. I just like how that distortion kind of helped it cut once we get all the guitars on. You'll hear that in a second. All right, so that's the drums and the bass. The bass is coming up on channel 13. And like I said, I'm using output 27 of my I/O and the patch bay to patch the distorted bass sound up on monitor return 5 over here on the console. So I have everything in front of me. So I can move some stuff around. I can try it. You can see even here on the bass, I've got 3 different markings. I even have a marking for one of the takes I liked a certain volume. I was trying moving some volumes around while I was playing, and the volumes also changed when I added the distortion in. So I make markings here on the console either so I can go back to them, or sometimes I'm actually doing manual automation, and I just use strips of tape for that. But it allows me to kind of play around a little bit and experiment to find out what I like, because my first bass tone I didn't like it until the end of the day when I finally ran into the bass tone that I was like, okay, now I'm happy with it. But it took me a little while on the bass for some reason.